Coming up on this week's show, one of Sega's biggest franchises is back.
Fans restore the Super Mario movie.
And we talk about modern retro consoles with the guys from Evercade.
The Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each week with our amazing friends at Bitmap Books. Now, if you're a fan of the C64, you need to check out Commodore 64, a visual compendium celebrating one of the most popular home computers of all time and taking you on a journey over 500 pages through its incredible library. You can check out that and lots more on their website at bitmapbooks.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 278, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to this week's show. And when I say warm, I do mean warm. I'm hoping that a bead of sweat is not going to drop from my brow into my mixer and short it out today. It is warm here in the UK.
It's really warm. I'm like, I was about to say something really rude then, but I'm sweating so much. Like, I'm just sat here with like all the windows open and stuff. I'm hoping it doesn't affect the recording too much, but usually like I'm locked in the man cave with the door closed and stuff, but it just can't happen today. As soon as it gets to like 25 degrees, that's it. Like, we just don't function right in the UK, do we?
No, and everyone always complains as well. They're like, "Oh, I really hate this rain and this bad weather," and then it gets hot, and they're like, "Oh, it's too hot, isn't it, guys?"
My wife literally said that today. It's nice when you're on holiday, but when you've actually got to function, like, you know, when you've got to work and you've got to do stuff and you've got to do your podcast, it's not nice.
Well, I was thinking before, actually, because obviously, gaming, memories of Christmas is when you got new video games and everything. But I was thinking retro gaming and summer also kind of go hand in hand for me as well. I mean, I don't know if you guys were the same. I've got memories on like, those endless summer holidays, going around friends' houses. We'd go to like Martin's house because he'd have a Super Nintendo. Then we'd go to Ricky's house because he had a Mega Drive for a bit, and I'd take the dog and his parents would give you food. And then on a Saturday, we'd go to the seaside and play, the arcade games as well. So I have got strong memories of gaming as a kid in the summer holidays.
Yeah, totally. I was exactly the same. And we used to swap our Mega Drive with our cousin Snaz or with my uncle Snaz over the 6 weeks holiday. So that, plenty of retro gaming there, or as much as we possibly could before our parents would kick us out of the house and say, go play out.
But today, we have got a really interesting show now. Obviously on the show, we kind of go behind the scenes on the companies that brought us video games and consoles and systems from our childhood. But also, we like to cover modern developments in the world of retro gaming as well. And today, we're going to be joined by Andrew Byatt and Sean Cleaver, who work at Evercade. And now they're a company, actually, that we cover a hell of a lot on the show, actually. They've got so many really cool new developments all the time.
It's interesting, the Evercade, because when I first saw it, I thought, right, a handheld console. It was first handheld, and now they've got the Evercade VS, which is a kind of home-based console for multiplayer. But when it first came out, I was like, a cartridge system. They're bringing out a kind of retro emulation cartridge system when you've got all these other ones with SD cards and you can load it in, and then they're going to have a limited selection on this cartridge. But actually, the appeal of having something that's been picked for you and is on a cartridge and at a reasonable price as well, it is really, really reasonable. And, having that cartridge and just those games, you can explore and find new titles, and they've got so many cool titles on there as well. They've got like the Atari collection on there, Interplay, they've got modern stuff as well, like Xenocrisis and Tanglewood and stuff. So it's a really interesting interview because we talk about kind of like setting up this console and what were the problems when you were starting and how they've kind of fixed it up. They've got some lots of retro influence in there and kind of what they wanted to aim to do. Because originally it was a bit like a Lynx mixed with a Game Gear, mixed with a Mega Drive and all kinds of different consoles, really.
Yeah, we kind of get their history in terms of, systems that did influence them. I mean, the Lynx, as we talk to Andrew in particular, he was a big Lynx fan back in the day. And I know Joe and I, we both got Atari Lynxi. And they're, they were, even though they weren't obviously as popular as a Game Boy, as a kid, that was always the most impressive. I mean, up there with the Game Gear as well, just having full colour graphics, even though you got about 20 minutes of battery out of them. They were great systems back then.
Yeah, now the battery power is really good. And they've concentrated on the D-pad a lot, so the D-pad's kind of like a Sega Saturn as well, which is interesting as well. A proper mashup console, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be interesting just to find out, what kind of goes into making a decent retro console in 2021. Because we've all had those. Your mum probably got you one for Christmas at some point, like a cheap little emulation box, and then you load it up and the audio is like, half the speed it should be, and the screen tearing. And
I literally have 4 of them. In my, and you know what? Fair enough. People think about it. Like, I've got like 4 in my cupboard. And 2 of them were from my mum, 1 from my sister, and 1 from like work when it was my 30th birthday. And it's nice that people are like, oh, Joe's into retro games. It's actually my birthday in a couple of days. And my mum was like, what do you want? And I was like, just give me money. I'm going to go retro shopping myself. Like,
don't buy me anything.
Just like, I know that sounds really ungrateful, but I'm just like, just give me like £30 because I've got like 4 of them now. And I've not got the heart to sell them or anything like that. So
yeah, so it is more of a job than you think, actually getting that emulation spot on and getting these classic games running on this platform, with a decent experience as well, particularly for those of us. They're aiming at a market that's going to go out and buy physical games. So obviously, they kind of compare in here, those other systems are kind of like, the Netflix of gaming. They're more like the vinyl, like a proper collector's experience. So, an interesting chat. We're going to be joined by the guys from Evercade, all about making modern retro consoles. They're going to be on the show in around 20 minutes from now. Now, of course, we keep you up to date with all the big gaming headlines in the world of retro from the last 7 days. And another story that dropped just as we were recording last week's show, and we did mention it, that Sega have announced a new Virtua Fighter game. Kind of. Yeah. So literally, what were we talking about? We were talking about Sonic or something, weren't we? And I was just like, this keeps happening to us. And funny enough, we're going to talk about Sonic again shortly. But yeah, literally, as I refreshed like my Facebook while we were recording last week, Virtua Fighter 5. So I've had to dig deep with this one. This is all part of Sega's 60th anniversary this year, which is really cool. And at the point of recording this, Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown has gone live on PS Plus from yesterday, which is June the 1st. And then you found out that the arcade port of it, so arcade cabinets of it for Japan, are coming out today on June the 2nd at the point of recording this, which is really cool. So I at first thought this was a completely new Virtua Fighter, but as it turns out, Virtua Fighter 5 actually came out in 2006 for like the PS3 and Xbox 360. Yeah, then I've got it actually next.
You've got it. There you go.
Virtua Fighter.
Virtua Fighter.
Yeah, we do get comments on YouTube.
Then there was another re-release of it, which I think was called Virtua Fighter 5 Showdown in like 2012.
Was that the arcade one? Yeah, because we had an arcade cabinet at my work.
Yeah.
For that one, and no one got any work done for about 3 months when we had that in the office.
And now there's Ultimate Showdown, which is, the latest version, which essentially is a re-release of number 5 with nicer graphics. It's all nice in HD, using original artists for the soundtrack, but they've remade and remixed completely, remade the soundtrack, which they, the producer of the game is saying he thinks reflects, the game better, the soundtrack better, apparently. But what kind of caught my eye, we're kind of talking about a newer game here, was there is a Legendary Pack DLC for it, which is $7.99. I believe the main game is free on PS Plus, if you remember PS Plus, but for $7.99 you can download the Legendary Pack, which lets you essentially play the new game with a virtual, I was going to say it wrong again, Virtua Fighter 1 skin. It's so the original blocky graphics and everything.
It's interesting because my memories of when Virtua Fighter came out, it was like that Legendary Pack is exactly what it kind of looked like. It was not obviously in as high resolution, but that was like Sega at that point. They were 2D kings, and no one really thought they could do 3D that well until this came out, and it was a bit floaty. Yeah, it was like very. It was very. It was the first one that used the AM2 chipset as well.
Yeah,
and that kind of blew them into that 3D world, and really impressed people. And I remember that was like, oh, okay, Sega can do kind of futuristic stuff, because it was a bit 2D.
And it was early. It was like 93 or something as well, wasn't it? Like 93, 94?
And 92 was Virtua Racing. Yeah. And then Virtua Fighter and Daytona, if you remember that as well.
Yeah, man. So, and you get, okay, I don't want to sit here, we're not being paid, by Sega or anything like that. $7.99, okay, DLC $7.99. It'd be nice if it was free with the game, but the game seems to be free anyway. But Yeah, all 38 characters with the polygonal version, which is really cool. And then you get like 19 extra costumes and all different stages and stuff like that. So it's nice. I wouldn't say it's their biggest IP for their 60th anniversary, but they've been doing a lot of things over this kind of last year, haven't they, to celebrate the 60th anniversary?
Yeah, and I think it's cool that they've kind of given fans that mode to play it with the original graphics. And like Ravi said, I mean, I've got memories of going into my local arcade and seeing, I still remember it was, a really bright white arcade cabinet. And that, stood out in itself because most of the other ones are like, dark colors. And you had those graphics on there, and now they look ridiculous. The polygonal fighters, and they've got square hands and everything. But seeing something that was 3-dimensional, I'd never seen a fighting game like that. I mean, I still would have picked Mortal Kombat any day over playing Virtua Fighter in the arcade, if I'm honest. But even later on, I remember, when that came out on the 32X, it was kind of a big selling point for that too. And I know they brought it out on the Sega Saturn when that was released. But I remember by that stage, people saying, look, by 95, 96, the graphics looked a bit dated.
Yeah.
So I've got to remember, didn't like Sega kind of reboot that for the Saturn and send out free copies to everyone because they thought they could do better?
The exact story, but it's called like Remix or something like that. But yeah, you think if you could prove you had a copy of it or you had a copy of the Sega Saturn that came with it, you could claim a free copy of it with like updated graphics and physics and stuff like that. I'm not too sure, but yeah, you are right. It's because it was a dated game by kind of like 95. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's cool. Like I say, it's for me, it's not Sega's biggest IP personally, but it's big in Japan. They're bringing it out as a physical cabinet as well, which is really cool because I know actual arcades are still really big in Japan and stuff. But yeah,
it's cool. They've got all the players that are playable because I remember the old man, the drunken kung fu fighting style that was in there as well. That was. Yeah, it was floaty, but add drunken kung fu style as well. It's like, God, mega floaty.
Get drunk and then play as him.
Yeah.
I have to try and get my office to get another arcade cabinet in now. It's been re-released.
Why did your office even have one? That's what I want to know. It was some
promotional thing like Sega, because I worked in Leicester Square in London then.
Okay.
And they came in and they said, look, it's a big like media building I worked in. They give us like 2 or 3 of them in the office just so we talk about it on the radio and the TV and things, I think.
Yeah.
Might not do it now that I work in a different place. I'm literally the only person in there all day at the moment because of COVID. So it might be a big ask, but, worth a shot if you're listening, Sega. But yeah, really cool, I think. And it's interesting to see that Sega are kind of giving all of these previous titles, for their 60th anniversary a bit of love, isn't it? And updating them. So I look forward to seeing.
They're their best franchises. They're their best assets. I'm glad that they're focusing on them and actually realizing.
I don't feel like it's their best like asset, but at the same time, like I'm probably wrong. Do you know? Like there's probably people screaming at me now, going, he's completely wrong. He's just obsessed with Sonic. So it probably is. It probably is like their second biggest IP, to be perfectly honest.
Nothing can beat Virtua Tennis for me.
Oh yeah,
that was just so good.
The Dreamcast and the arcade.
Yeah, I mean, new Golden Axe would be amazing, which we've heard rumors about for a while, and you think that's kind of got to happen. Shinobi, it'd be great to see that kind of getting a bit of a reboot as well. Fantasy Star, Alex Kidd, Daytona, it'd be great to get a new Daytona game as well.
Listing them all off now, like. Is that
Sega Rally?
I mean, I know they've already done Streets of Rage 4, but Streets of Rage 5? Come on.
Yeah, so Sega, the gift that keeps on giving at the moment, so we'll look forward to seeing what the rest of 2021 brings. Now, this is an interesting game. Daymare 1994, another horror game.
Yeah, we'll just call us the bloody modern hour right now. We're talking about all these modern retro games. I guess that's the theme of the episode. So I wanted to talk about this. So Daymare 1998 came out about 2 or 3 years ago now for the PS4.
We talked about that, didn't we? I remember.
We did talk about it, and we spoke about it, I believe, on the After Hours not that long ago. I mentioned it.
Remind us what that was then for people that didn't hear it.
So essentially, Daymare 1998 was a third-person survival horror game, massively inspired by Resident Evil, by like Resident Evil 4, essentially. That sort of gameplay, the over-the-shoulder, popping zombie headshots and stuff. And the fact that it's even called Daymare 1998 and it's set in a city that's had a zombie outbreak, and essentially you're playing as different survivors trying to get out, playing through the story, unlocking the truth behind the virus and all that kind of stuff. And it's very Resident Evil. You have puzzles, you have zombies, you have mutants, and essentially the project started out by a company called, an Italian company called Leonardo Interactive. And essentially It was a couple of guys, and they were actually making a Resident Evil 2 remake in like 2015, 2014, 2015, themselves, a fan remake on the Unreal Engine. And essentially, Capcom kind of reached out to them and said, guys, look, you're going to have to stop because we're actually remaking Resident Evil 2 ourselves. So, they got the whole cease and desist thing. But what Capcom were really cool about this, they invited them to the studio to show them what they were working on, to show them the Resident Evil 2 that they were making, the remake, and pretty much help them then go on to make Daymare, which I thought was awesome because, Nintendo, they're always like slapping these lawsuits and stuff at people. But Capcom turned around and says, you know what, this is really cool. Stop it because we are re-releasing Resident Evil 2, but come on down, see what we're making. Here's a few tips and go turn it into your own game. And that's what they did. They turned it into Daymare 98, and it was a Kickstarter. It was successful. It's a good game. If you're into survival horror, I recommend it. It is rough around the edges. It is a bit clunky. It is definitely an indie game. But I'm pleased to see that they've done well enough to make a sequel, well, a prequel to it called Daymare 1994 Sandcastle, which got a release trailer this week, and it's going to be coming out. It just says 2022 at the moment, but very much more of the same, very, very Resident Evil influenced survival horror with that very nice looking PS2 kind of graphics, kind of, very similar looking to Resident Evil 4 once again. But this one seems a little bit kind of Dead Space influenced as well. There's kind of like that necromorph. The zombies have got like the sharp kind of tentacle arms and stuff like that from the trailer, which is really cool. But more of the same, which I'm happy with. If you like old school survival horror, then it's a great little project to kind of back. So I'm excited for it.
You can't get enough Resident Evil anyway.
I can't get enough Resident Evil. I've just completed Resident Evil Village for like the 4th time in a row. And then when people are banging out, kind of Resident Evil clones, I'm all over it, especially when they're like 20 quid new, because that's how much Daymare 98 was. So, I'll be picking this one up next year as well.
I think it is very cool as well that a company would actually look at a fan project. And like you said, so many of them just kill them off, don't they? The fact that they actually supported this, that's the way to do it, isn't it? And that's the way to get support from gamers.
And you wouldn't expect that from like Capcom. Like you'd think, they're just one of these massive, massive game developers kind of thing. One of the biggest ones. You would have thought they'd just shut it down, but no. It feels very like put their arm around their shoulder and go, come on, have a look. Do your thing, but don't call it Resident Evil. Call it your own thing, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So nice work, Capcom. So we'll put a link to the trailer and the story if you want to check that out when it's available in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now we're going to be talking all about, of course, new retro systems with the guys from Evercade in a few minutes' time. But that's not the only one on the market. Plenty more coming out. Analog Pocket. Everyone's been talking about that, but also. This is not the catchiest title ever, I'll admit. The Abanic Retro Game 351V. This looks like a Pocket Game Boy.
Yeah, so people have been waiting for the Analog Pocket. And the Analog Pocket really is like the ultimate Game Boy. It's designed to run all those titles and run them natively and stuff. This is a bit different. Ambanic do like retro gaming consoles that you can play all different systems on, like PSPs, N64s, and they're not amazingly good with naming consoles. We've covered before their RG350P.
Imagine putting that on your Christmas list.
Yeah, and we've had a lot.
Just Google what it is again. Hang on, what is it again?
We've had a lot of listeners that kind of enjoy these consoles because they're pretty good value, like the RG350 you can get for like 60 quid, and it's a nice little form factor. It kind of looks like a little DS or something, or kind of like an Evercade as well, actually. But this is in a Game Boy form factor, and it's got like a little bit higher resolution, a nice screen. It's interesting, I'm reading this review here at the moment, and it's a review on Gizmondo, and the guy's kind of complaining, oh, well, the position of the thumb pad's a bit weird and stuff. And
I thought it was interesting that it actually has an analog stick on it. It's like a Game Boy with an analog stick. It's weird. Like, it's cool.
It's like the Game Boy form factor, but you need to be able to play other stuff on it. So they've added shoulder pad buttons in it. And
you know what? I think that's the most interesting thing about it is it's got that Game Boy Pocket form factor, like you say, but the shoulder buttons are halfway down the back of the console rather than at the top. So
it's like it's got a big bum or something.
Yeah, it's got like a big bum. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It's got a big bum with an L1, L2, R1 and R2 buttons on it. But I thought that was really interesting because I've not seen that before.
Yeah.
It might be, I imagine more comfortable to hold than trying to wrap your fingers around the top of a Game Boy kind of form factor.
And it means it's got more battery life in there as well. So it's $100 at the moment, and it comes in wood grain as well. So LGR would be happy with that. There's a wood grain option.
These are really cool, but it just does feel a little bit like there is one every single kind of month, every other month. And it just feels... I'm going to say it, I'm going to be a bit negative. I don't like to be negative, but it just feels a little bit like I can't keep buying these things. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you know.
I know it is a saturated market. I know what you mean. And whenever we go to retro events, you remember those days.
Yeah.
We'd always see, in the bar afterwards, it'd always be a guy who had one and a guy who had another one. About which one's that? Then, you hear about so many of them. And you're trying to get your head around so many different products on the market that are kind of doing a similar kind of thing. Like you said, I think the thing that really sets this one apart is having those kind of extra buttons on there.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly, though, they're saying here that the CPU in there is good enough to play, Game Boy Advance, Mega Drive, Super Nintendo games. It doesn't work that well with Dreamcast or N64.
I think that's good because you get so many. I'm going a little bit off topic here, but you get so many Pandora's boxes and these MAME cabinets and stuff, and they have the Dreamcast and N64 and PS1 emulation on them, and they go, oh yeah, it comes with 10,000 games built in. Go on your N64, and they just don't work. They either they literally don't load up or they just they're terrible quality, terrible emulation. So it's nice when a company comes along and just says it doesn't run them. This is for play your Super Nintendo ROMs on it, play your Mega Drive ROMs on it, play your Game Boy ROMs on it. I do like that honesty. I
haven't looked into this enough, but it looks like there's not much difference between the cheaper RG350. Maybe our listeners can let us know. Maybe the screen looks a bit better. Maybe it's got a bit of better battery life and stuff. But the other one's 56 quid, and this is about $100, which is probably
if I was going to have
70,
one of them. If I was going to have one of them, I would have the newer one. So the newer one is called the RG351V. I would have that one just simply because it does look more comfortable.
Because of the 1V.
Yeah, because of the 1V, that's why I want it. No, because it genuinely does look nicer.
Yeah. It's a nice device, definitely. Yeah. For that price, it's not bad at all. I think I need to get my hands on one and actually play one to kind of know what
you can tell. Maybe that's something we could do for the after hours.
Yeah.
You know what though? I've got to say, looking at this, that analog thumbstick doesn't look the most comfortable placement on the bottom left corner of the device.
Well, it's interesting that it's got one because it's obviously they're saying no Dreamcast, no N64.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, why it needed one.
Maybe maybe for some arcade games in there, some early arcade emulation, maybe. And
apparently PS1 games run okay on it.
Okay, so probably some PS1 games on there and stuff like that. But yeah, the placement doesn't look the most comfortable with it. It does look a little bit afterthought kind of thing. And
they're kind of complaining as well because they're saying, it's 16 by 9. But I think, if you're getting something like this price, the Analog Pocket is not going to be this price. It will be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
And, and that will be a proper Game Boy kind of one where this is trying to do something different,
And again, I'm looking at the comments here on the article on Gizmondo that I'll put in our show notes. And there are, at the top comments straight away is someone saying, oh, I could just play these games on my Android phone and carry a Bluetooth controller in my bag, and which is not the same experience as having something that feels like a Game Boy and having it all built in for me.
Yeah. I know a lot of people, especially on Discord, that absolutely love these devices.
Yeah, I do think, the ones I've played at shows and stuff, they do feel just like, like a great Game Boy, how you wish they were when you were a kid, or like, an amazing Atari Lynx with a nice screen and everything. So that is one thing that I think, obviously having all the games as ROMs on there is really convenient. Not having to carry all cartridges around, and probably shouldn't say it, but not having to buy all the games is quite nice. But also having, the leaps and bounds in not only battery technology, but screen technology as well. They just look so much better than the systems we had as a kid. I know you'll be excited about this, Joe. One of your all-time favourite movies has now been restored, and you get 20 minutes of extra Super Mario Brothers movie.
Can I just say, I think about 5 years ago, we were talking about video game movies, and I says, I like the Mario Brothers film, and now it's my favourite film of all time. So yeah, funny enough, I think the last time we spoke about the Super Mario Brothers film was in 2019 when somebody found the footage on an old VHS tape of the extended adult cut. Essentially, it's called the adult version of the film.
That sounds wrong.
Yeah, I know.
There's a sexy scene in it, apparently, where they're
Oh,
in
is
a
there?
nightclub
Ooh.
wearing revealing outfits.
Revealing
and stuff.
outfits.
Oh,
I know,
yeah.
it's the Big Bertie with her boobies out, I believe.
Okay.
There we go. Spoiler alert. But
Joe's watched it.
yeah, I haven't watched it. I haven't. It was me who found it, really.
Yeah, they found the VHS at Joe's house.
They found it in my house.
Upscaled
But-
it.
so the original version was 104 minutes, and Internet Archive have restored it. They've restored the quality, restored the scenes, and they've made it 125 minutes long, so just over 20 minutes longer. From what I've seen, it's mostly extended versions of the scenes with a few more words of dialogue and stuff like that. For me, it doesn't look like I have to go out there and see it. I don't love the film enough to be like, oh my God, I need to see this now with 20 extra minutes. You know, it's not like Blade Runner. You know, when the new Blade Runner cuts come out and there's an extra 4 minutes and everybody flocks to see it. But it's interesting that, you know, a group of people have gone through the effort to restore it, and it does look good.
And you've already watched the film probably about 5 times this week anyway.
No, I haven't. I've got it saved on Amazon to watch, but by the looks of things.
It is on Amazon Prime, isn't it?
It is on Amazon Prime.
It's on archive.org as well. This one is for free. And it's
Okay.
Right.
pretty amazing. Like, I don't know how long that'll be on with Nintendo and everything. But it's amazing when they do these restorations and kind of upscaling of, you know, old VHS footage and then make it really high quality. And it says that it's actually got like a dubbed version in honor of the husband and wife director team as well. So it's like 125 minutes. Extra scenes.
So essentially, you know, from the breakdown, just to kind of, you know, for those who don't want to go watch it, essentially there's a subplot about a mafia plumbing company who are kind of after Luigi and Mario in the real world. There's a scene where Dennis Hopper, you know, the King Koopa, kills somebody with the de-evolving gun and turns somebody into slime, and they took that out because they didn't want to show anybody dying in the film. And then also the club, the Big Bertha in the club, who's got a more revealing outfit, I believe. And then some of the scenes are just a couple of seconds longer, and a couple of extra bits of dialogue. But yeah, that's the main thing. They cut somebody getting killed, and they cut the mafia bit, which does actually sound quite interesting. Like, actually, do I want to watch that now? That there's a subplot about the mafia being after them as well.
And you can see why these kind of things were taken out, because I mean, it was mainly kids that went to see the film with their parents back in the day.
What's the mafia, Daddy?
Tony Soprano.
Yeah, interesting to see. And I mean, there's bound to be a new Super Mario movie at some point, so, you know, worth seeing the first one before you check out the new one that will undoubtedly be better. Probably not in Joe's opinion, but for everybody else. Now, what's the Pico computer? We do talk about Pico quite a lot. This is a new development then, an article on a Hackaday. This is the world's first RP2040 QWERTY computer. This thing looks tiny.
This is insanely small. It's the size of a credit card, and it's got a full QWERTY keyboard on there. So what you could do is you could actually run emulation on this. So you can run like BBC B on this as well. And you know, it's running with a Raspberry Pi in there. It's not got much circuitry required. It's powered by USB-C as well, and it's just a tiny little device. You know, I've seen it everywhere because people are printing the PCBs and stuff, and yeah, it's really cheap as well. It's got an IPS display, but that display is you're not really gonna be able to see much on there.
It's monochrome.
Yeah, and it's running Arduino Core as well. You can have like a USB on there as well, Ethernet connections with LAN as well. So it's like this tiny credit card computer that you could basically take around, hack. You can add different things onto it, and you know, it's got your GPIO port up at the top there as well. So I'm sure we're going to see people doing tons of things with these and creating.
Ravi's just going to go into his wallet to pay for something and be like, oh no, I took a credit card out from my Pico computer.
It's my Pico computer. Let me just program a credit card on that.
Yeah.
I
just imagine Ravi going up to an ATM like, John Connor from Terminator 2.
That's exactly
what it is. Yeah. To me, it just looks cool. And just the idea that you've got a full QWERTY keyboard on there as well. I don't like on-screen keyboards and stuff. Like having one that you can actually tap and play on and then run basic emulators on as well, which is really cool. You could be playing Elite on this.
I mean, for people who haven't seen the pictures, I'll link the article up as well. Really, this thing is the size of a Raspberry Pi. And the keys, I mean, it's not a full-size keyboard on here. These are tiny little, like, micro switches, aren't they? I imagine you've got to tap them with your little finger. And then you've got this small, like a postage stamp display in monochrome in the top right of the unit here as well. It does look like a great little hacker's device, though. The only thing I'm wondering is, because it's just a Raspberry Pi, is it like a battery pack for this thing then, or do you have to use it? I think
you have to separately power it by a USB C or micro USB. But I don't think there's any room for a battery in there unless it's like a watch battery, and that's not going to be able to do anything but keep the time, really.
You could use like a phone bank, that charges your phone, I guess, with it. That probably work.
It just looks impressive, and I've seen like the PCBs are available on a PCBWay and stuff, and it's kind of been all over the internet on the nerdy sites that I go on. This little Pico computer's been popping up, so if you check that out, and I think we're just going to see tons of projects coming out from this, and Pico computers built into things, and maybe speeding up things or doing like side processes of stuff or built into ATMs, who knows.
Now, just before we get into our chat with the guys from Evercade, let's take a moment to give a huge thank you to a very big supporter of the Retro Hour podcast who've supported us for a good few years now, actually, and we love them, and this is our friends at Beer 52. Now, it is a lovely warm day here in the UK today. How lovely would it be when you finish, Joe, just to get out in the garden, crack a beer in the sunshine?
Finish, how about now? There we go.
Any excuse just to drink during the show, Joe. Well, this is our amazing friends at Beer 52, who are the world's biggest beer club with over 170,000 active members. Now, we've actually all got a box of Beer 52 nearby. You're obviously already getting stuck into yours, Joe. The experience of getting one of these is amazing, though, isn't it?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've only got a couple left, but I have been, while the weather's been really nice and stuff like that, it is really nice just to go to your fridge and they're just there and they're picked for me. Sometimes when you go to like Asda or whatever and you go down the aisle, it's just so much to choose from. So it is really nice when they just send them to you and you're just like, these just look delicious. So I've only got 3 left. I've just cracked open a Dexter salted caramel. Now this is a milk stout and I thought, that sounds a little bit puddingy, but they're actually a lot more refreshing than you think they are. I've also got the Raspberry Pi Raspberry Oat Milkshake, which we mentioned last week, which I'm really, really looking forward to. And I've got an Eternal Waves Northern Monk IPA left as well. And these are really, really delicious. And you get a free snack, which is awesome.
And you get their magazine.
You do get their magazine.
It tells you all about making beer and, different. I think the current edition we've got is a Yorkshire edition.
Yep.
So they're kind of talking about, the breweries in Yorkshire and stuff. It's really interesting. And I think, the main thing about Beer 52 is it encourages you to try things that you normally wouldn't try.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, that Raspberry Pi one as well, which I posted that in our Discord and people are like, hang on, there's a Raspberry Pi beer.
Yeah.
It gets the computer, retro fans excited, that does, a Raspberry Pi beer.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, I would never go for a stout or a milkshake beer or anything like that. So when they kind of came in the post, I was a bit like, okay, this is interesting. This is a bit like, right, am I gonna enjoy these? But they're really nice, and like I say, it's just cool having it kind of chosen for you, and it's just there in the fridge, ready after a hard day's work or a hard day doing your podcast.
So we want you to get involved and get free 8 craft beers from Beer 52. That is a free case of 8 craft beers delivered to you. All you have to cover is a postage cost of £5.95, and us and Beer 52 will take care of the rest. So you need to nip onto this website right now, beer52.com. That's beer52.com/retro, and you will get a case of 8 craft beers, the magazine, the snack. And the good thing about Beer 52 is you can pause or cancel at any time. There's no commitment. And each month they will send you a case with a different theme. And you can customize it as well. So, if you don't like dark beer, and Ravi, you're more into light beers, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. And I love the German beers that they did as well. I'm really into like wheat beer and those kind of pilsners as well. So there's a choice for everyone, really.
Yeah, so all we want you to do is nip onto this site right now. And of course, it goes without saying, you'll be really helping out the podcast by taking advantage of these great offers that we get you from our sponsors. Head to beer52.com/retro to get 8 craft beers on us. And a big thank you to our friends at Beer 52. Now, of course, at the moment, with things gradually starting to reopen around the world, I mean, you guys have been, I still haven't made it into town to do any retro gaming shopping yet, but I'm hoping this Friday is going to be the first time in about 18 months.
We've bought them all, Dan. We've bought them all.
Bought them all, mate.
You're going to clean out all our local game shops. But we have been showing some love to retro gaming shops all around the world over the last few weeks, with your help as well. So if you've got a retro gaming shop that you go to buy your retro games, and we are talking shops that exist right now, aren't we? Because we've had some people that are like, I used to go to Future Zone back in 1992. That is not what we mean. We mean we want to show love to shops that are open now, give them a bit of free advertising on the podcast and big up how incredible they are. And hopefully we can help them out because, they've all been through a tough time all around the world over the last year.
Yeah, please contact us and tweet us about this or email us on the contact form on the website because we want these video game shops to continue and we want kids to be able to go to video game shops, not just sit and redeem codes for the whole of their life, get some actual physicality. And this week, we've been contacted by Gamer Geek Dragon on Twitter, who says, here in North Virginia, we have Starland, and it's an amazing shop that's been around for 30 years. Yeah, it's been around that long. Retro gaming and modern, and they do retro games and repairs too. So this shop has been running since 1991.
Since
before these were retro.
Yeah, before these were all retro, yeah. My main issue with this shop is that it's not here in the UK and I can't go visit it because this looks awesome, man. This shop looks huge. They've got everything. But what I really like is they've got an arcade corner. They've got X-Men the arcade machine, the 4-player one. They've got Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Captain America and the Avengers, and a couple of pinball games, Simpsons Pinball and Star Wars Pinball, just set up for people to come and play. I don't know if they're for sale. They could well be, but this game shop looks awesome, man. I maybe I need to convince my wife that next year when we go on holiday, we go to what did you say? Was it West Virginia?
North Virginia.
Virginia. And she'll be like, oh, yeah, it's really lovely here. And I'll be like, yeah, there's a game shop. I'll see you in 2 days.
Yeah, I think everything's big in America, but this just looks absolutely epic. Like, the one thing that is just making me completely drool is they've got a selection at the top of boxed consoles. And there they've got a Virtual Boy. They've got a Jaguar, 32X. Like, oh man, this place that's wicked. And I'm sure these photos aren't doing justice for it as well. They seem to have some rare Sega Saturn titles as well.
It does look amazing. It kind of reminds me, particularly you walk into the shop by the looks of it, and they've got the glass cabinets there at the counter with a load of games in. Behind it, it's pretty much floor to ceiling games on shelves all the way behind the counter. Then in the middle of it, it kind of reminds me of when you used to go to Blockbuster, and there's all them shelves in the middle with, kind of at head height, and you can look down the games that are there on all different systems. So it looks like they've packed a lot into this space.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of systems that they cover as well. So 3DO, CDI, Channel F as well, which we hardly get over here.
So you name it, they seem to sell it. There's a good 40 consoles listed on the website as well by the looks of things. So
just imagine really having that in your town as a constant, being able to go there for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. I actually said to my wife today, we were driving along, and I said, Nottingham, you know what it needs? It needs a retro game shop. And she goes, well, you open one. And I was like, oh no, I'm not taking the risk.
Sell your collection, Joe.
We'll just buy it.
Yeah, I would just buy it all and try and keep it, wouldn't I? Joe, you've made yourself bankrupt in a week. Oh yeah.
Yeah, she'll soon regret saying that.
You wouldn't be able to give them away. You'd be like, no, this is my baby.
Yes, this place looks amazing, particularly the fact that they've been around since these systems were modern. I imagine they've got a load of knowledge about them as well, having dealt with them for 30 years, and they do, repairs and mods as well. So if you want to check them out, their website is estarland.com, and they're there in Northern Virginia. So a big thank you for getting in touch with that. And of course, we'll link that up in our show notes as well. Now, just quickly, time to give a big thank you to our amazing patrons, the people who keep the Retro Hour podcast coming week in, week out, making sure that we can get the show out every Friday and bring you guests every single week. And we can't stress enough just how incredible and, how needed your support is. And of course, we do have a load of perks as well if you want to back us on Patreon. We've had a few new patrons over the last week. Of course, we'll give you a shout in a moment. But what do patrons get, Ravi, for backing us?
Oh, patrons get a lot of love, but they also get a lot of perks. We've got the private Discord channel that they can chat in, and they can get episodes early as well. But episodes ad-free. You can also get a T-shirt, the Retro Hour After Hours as well. So a whole additional podcast, which is just fantastic as we kind of go behind the scenes. But it's not us talking about all our equipment and stuff. It's us talking about memories and old retro gaming. It's really good fun. And then we've got the patrons meetup as well, which is just fabulous because we all get on the webcam. We all chat about anything really that comes up. And, it's a huge knowledge base. The amount of kind of people there that are sharing information and going, oh, yeah, this is how you fix that and fix that. It's kind of like a retro repair session sometimes.
And now that we're into June, there will be one coming up in the next couple of weeks. I will put a link in our Patreon. It's there. You can join in, chat to us. Just a group of guys for a couple of hours on a weekend. We hang out, chatting about all things retro and geeky and nerdy. Or you can just watch if you want. Some people just come along and have it on while they're doing work. So it'd be great to see you there. And of course, the main reason that you're doing it is just to support the Retro Hour podcast. So a massive thank you to our newest supporters, Simon Wood,
Dan Claude,
Simon Barnes,
Charlie Needham,
and Fabrice DeVille,
who all backed us on Patreon. Your support is hugely appreciated. And if you'd like to do the same, you'll find it at theretrohour.com. And it is Joe's birthday coming up. If you'd like to give Joe a little present, here's something you could do. Why don't you leave us a review on your podcast client of choice? You'd appreciate that, wouldn't you, Joe?
Watch us get some hate now. I hate that Joe.
The show would be great if Joe was
too old now. It's been his birthday.
Yeah. So, they always do make a big difference. I don't think we've had any new ones for a couple of weeks, but if you listen on Apple Podcasts or any other platform, leave us a little review on there. It helps get the show in front of new people, helps us climb up the chart. Honestly, it'll take you a couple of minutes. So any reviews, 3 stars or above are always appreciated. We'd love to see that as well if you want another way to support the show. Right, then next we are going to get into talking all about making modern retro consoles with the guys from Evercade. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Now, on the show, often we look back at, companies from the past and talk about things that happened in the early days of video games. Today, a little bit different because we're going to be focusing on a company that's making really cool retro-themed products today, and a company that we do talk about a lot on this podcast because we think they're brilliant. Let's welcome on Sean Cleaver and Andrew Byatt from Evercade. Hello, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to have you joining us. Now, before we get into the work that you guys are doing at Evercade, which, everyone I've seen on YouTube and podcasts raves about the projects that you guys work on. Andrew, I know you're the managing director of Evercade, and Sean, you're the marketing manager. It's always nice to find out a bit of our guest geek credentials and kind of, go back to what initially got them into video games. Starting with you, Andrew, do you remember your kind of earliest gaming experience? Where did your interest begin?
I had an Amstrad PC 1512, I remember, and that was kind of my first, floppy disks, my first experience. I think my first console was a NES, so I'm actually 40 years old, so that's kind of when it started, 1985 onwards. And then I think I went through an Amiga phase. I actually had an Atari Lynx, which features on the Evercade as well. One of my favourite consoles, really. Lots of nostalgia for that product. And then onto the 16-bit stuff, and Mega Drive was my console. So NES to Mega Drive. So I've been around the roads a lot, and it comes across. I think in our selection of all the games that we do.
I remember having an Amstrad as well, and one of those models playing a Missile Command. I think it couldn't do much. No,
I had a game called, I think it was called Bruce Lee. I don't know if you remember that was. I think it actually was called Bruce Lee, and it was. I just remember spending hours and hours on that.
The Lynx as well. What an incredible system that was. Again, very underrated, I think. I know you guys are big fans of the Lynx.
Yeah, I think with the Lynx, it was one of those things where we had the like the high quality. It had a color screen and stuff before. We got Game Boy, and I think I was attracted to all the gadgets and gizmos that it was running. Something, doing the first of things. And then obviously, Game Boy kind of had the real quality of games, which took it on and on. But, there were some really, really nice games on the Lynx, which hopefully we've been able to bring back and get into people's hands again, because it's kind of one of those systems that, it has lots of fond memories about, but it's kind of gone away a little bit.
Yeah, and you don't have to plough through the AA batteries anymore.
Exactly, yeah.
What about you, Sean? What's kind of your background in gaming then? What got you into it initially?
Well, actually, not too dissimilar, really. We're not that far off in our age group, but I went down the Spectrum route as opposed to the Amstrad route after arcades. To be honest, arcades was my first full experience into gaming. Going to seaside towns, going on holiday, and just dropping money into things like Outrun. Anything with a steering wheel was straight up for me, like a must play. Ironically, I've just come back from a weekend away at the coast and just played the most recent Daytona game. So the same still applies, regardless of the 25, 30 years in between. But yeah, at the time, I then had a Spectrum. So I had a lot of those arcade ports and games that sort of came from those really early arcade ports. I eventually then upgraded to Sega and sort of went down that way. But it was really those old arcade ports that got me into it, and the old programming books that you used to get from W.H. Smith's, if you remember, sort of like the black cover ones where you could like program in your own version of Lunar Lander or a crazy golf game or something like that. So that was really my introduction. Nice and cheap and cheerful, but, very effective.
Yeah, and I think, that obviously it shaped an entire generation, didn't it, of, British kids that got into computers, the Spectrum.
Oh yeah, very much so, very much so. I think because there were so many similarities between that at the time, and when I was a kid at school, we had second, maybe third hand BBC micros, things like that, and the coding language and everything else was very similar. So we would be able to work with them at school, work with these at home, but it did become very clear, like late 80s, early 90s. I had to go away from this into something that was better. Like, I think the Master System was actually my first one that I got second or third hand, maybe. But that was the generation. You were getting all of these games. The rental stores had everything up on the shelves, and you knew which way it was going. So, yeah, eventually joined the rest of the console race. And apart from some brief dalliances with PC, I never really looked back.
I love that you mentioned the kind of accessories as well for the handheld consoles. Do you think we'll ever see like an Evercade magnifier glass or a kind of lighting setup?
Yeah, it's not one I thought about, actually.
Yeah, no. I think that's come up a few times, actually. People want some huge extendable thing you stick on the front of it, just to make it look so retro.
Yeah, some huge kind of monster or like a carry case or something like that.
Well, I've literally got a Game Gear down by the side of me at the moment, and it's still got the TV tuner in it from way back when. So I always look at that kind of thing and think that'd be interesting to have on the Evercade. Nice big TV aerial, nice little nod.
Yeah, because that doesn't work anymore now, does it? Now that analog TV's gone.
Nope, it doesn't work at all. Not unless you've got yourself a little antenna in your backyard, in which case you're probably doing a lot more things than trying to get a Game Gear tuner to work.
We've lost so much with teletext going and stuff like that. I think all that nostalgia.
Well, Andrew, what's kind of your history in the industry then? Have you kind of got a background in the gaming industry?
I actually I came from more of a licensing direction, actually, because obviously all the games on the system are licensed, so we have to approach the owners of all the content, and it's a big part of what we do is go out there and find officially licensed games, which is a whole story in itself, really. But my background is kind of product development, and then I was doing kind of lots of licensed electronics previously. So I was doing stuff with Disney and Marvel and all that kind of stuff. So lots of kids' headphones and various different electrical products, and lots of licensing experience from that. And then I've come into this business and kind of got into this area. I think, as I say, my history is very much as being a gamer, but then this is doing it for a job, which is kind of the dream, I suppose.
And were you also into like product design and kind of the electronic side of it?
Yeah, that's actually what I did as a degree, and kind of went on from there. Product design and marketing is really where I've been for the last 15 odd years. Lots of trips to China, lots of time over there spending developing products.
All the technical drawings and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. So that's my background, and spending a lot of time, with the original Evercade handheld, spending a lot of time sitting there, in factories. I think we went through about over sort of 12 iterations of the D-pad. So sitting there working on it, making sure that it felt right. That's what we've been doing. And a lot of that comes from product design background.
Well, talking about the company as well behind Evercade, Blaze Entertainment, what's kind of the background with the company then, and how was that formed, and what was kind of the mission?
So Blaze was an entity that kind of went out of business around 2015, who was doing a lot of kind of accessories and other things, and that business kind of closed down. The assets were kind of owned by a company called PQ, which is a games publisher, and they'd done some distribution for various kind of retro products as kind of not on their core business, but on the side. And they'd seen this was really successful. So what they'd done is signed some licenses and started to look into how they build their own products as opposed to distributing other people's products. I came into the business at that time about 3 years ago. What I was looking for, there was lots of products that they were producing or starting to produce, which had kind of a number of built-in games. So they'd had 20 games or 50 games, and they were kind of one and done products, nice products, but really what I wanted to do was something a little bit more interesting for people. So, we could build a community and build a growing product as such, instead of reiterating the same thing over and over again with new hardware. So we split out the company into into a new business, and because they owned the Blaze brand at the time, Blaze has had good distribution, a good name in distribution. So, lots of retailers across Europe and globally would know the brand. So we took the brand on really as our name, and that all kicked off the Evercade really. So that all that development started. The Evercade itself was just a way of really, as I say, making something that expanded, and you could buy it, and then you'd have another collection each. Every month, every couple of months, there'd be something new to play really. So it's that was the kind of passion, the idea behind it all. And I think making them into kind of modular products, we get to license individual products all the time. I think licensing is quite complicated in terms of when you have some of these products with like 50 games on, they'll have to go out and speak to 6 different companies. And let's say there's $5 available in licensing revenue for that product. Then what you can do is you have to give it out to all those 6 different companies, and it becomes a bit of a bun fight as to who gets what. My game's worth more than their game, etc. So what we've been able to do with Evercade is we've made these individual collections, which they earn from the licensor, and then what you can do is do another one and another one. Everyone earns a separate amount, which is, I know, getting a bit technical, but that's really one of the ideas. And we thought, what's the perfect way of delivering those collections was in a cartridge form, and kind of bringing back cartridges. So that's what we've done. And these individual collections, I think we're up to 26 now.
Yeah, so there's 16 currently available to purchase right now at time of recording. There will be 26 by the end of the year.
Well, were you guys involved with the Game Gadget at all? Because I saw that was a previous Blaze Entertainment product.
Yeah, no, that was completely different guys really doing that product. So I think Game Gadget was around 2014, something like that. I think they originally tried to create the iPod of gaming at that point, iPod of retro gaming, sorry. And yeah, I don't think it worked out. And then that product kind of disappeared.
Well, what were kind of people's initial reactions when you said you wanted to make a handheld cartridge console? Did they kind of think you guys were a bit mad?
Yeah, that was a really interesting thing. I think when we launched the product, we were really we had our instincts on what would work and what wouldn't, but until you get it into people's hands, you never know what's going to happen. I think we sent the original product out for review to some kind of influencers, and it was kind of the acid test. And when we got it out there, I think I sat and watched I don't think I could watch the actual first reviews with anyone else. I had to watch it on my own just to see what the reactions were like, and you kind of held your breath, and the reactions were good. In fact, I think one of the first reviews was like, "Is it crazy or genius?" was the title of the review. So I think it's seen as being, I wouldn't say genius, but certainly people don't really consider it crazy anymore. And we've managed to get that product out, and in the middle of all what was going on at the time with the pandemic, We're really proud to get it out within, I think we had a couple of months delay, which was or 3 months delay really from the kind of March time. We ended up getting out in June, which was pretty good going at the time. But yeah, no, the reaction's been fantastic. And I think bringing back cartridges is really the critical thing really for everybody. They're really enjoying having a physical thing in their hands, having a manual, having that kind of stuff. And also the like curated nature of the collections. I think with other devices, you might be confronted with thousands of games, not legitimate games, but this gives you kind of like, here you go, here's 10 games, here's a manual, tell you all about them, and then you can play them one by one and actually really enjoy them rather than kind of just skipping around and not really, getting into a game, perhaps like you do with this product.
I'd agree with that. I think curation is very much the key. I mean, a lot of the devices that sort of been in the market for years where you are playing retro games that are even officially licensed, either give you a wealth of games that or give you very little games that and any number of games that you've never heard of before, or are adaptations of different things. And you do end up with that overwhelming choice. I mean, I'm sure when we were all young, you would get the kind of market stall style cartridges that you'd have 25 in one, and you'd be like, whoa, what is this? And while our collections are all official and licensed, we got that much smaller number, and that curation of making sure not only you're getting something that you want to play, for example, if it's a high known game like something like a Double Dragon or a game in that ilk, mixed with some games that are good that you might not have heard of, or rental store games that that you remember from your memory of, I used to play that here and there, yeah. And I think those kind of curations and lists have been one of the key successes for that the cartridge delivery system. It really gives people the ability not to be overwhelmed with that choice, not to have that decision paralysis, and also not to have to feel, I need to get X amount of things onto my system in order to make it a worthwhile thing for me.
And also it's supporting the developers as well. So, these knockoff kind of carts that you can get on Amazon with every single game on an SD card. I'm sure the developers aren't getting anything for a lot of those, but this is actually all official and done to the official companies.
Yeah, there's the kind of ownership of the games from the past. But what we've also done with this is we signed a load of new games for old systems. There's a developers like Megacat Studios who, have been developing NES and Genesis games, which they were published today, which were developed in the last few years. And those we've made a cartridge of those collections, which is really fun, really good quality as well. And we're also releasing just in July. There's a cartridge we called Indie Heroes, which is actually very much like you're saying. So these are the guys, kind of not necessarily bedroom developers, but they're kind of some very small teams who a lot of it's passion projects, and we're getting their product into a physical release, and otherwise perhaps it'd never see a physical release. So it's really nice to get those products to market.
And it might actually raise the eyebrows of some of the big companies that own the assets and think, people are still actually interested in this title or this IP, and we might do something with it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic timing with that, because there's been quite a lot of companies and a lot of movement in those kind of circles as to what IP should be brought back and how they sort of use what they have in their back catalogue in a way. I mean, for years, I guess there has always been some kind of re-release of certain things, certainly in a digital way, on more major platforms. But the rise of the mini consoles, and then of course there's been the rise of now these miniature arcade units that have started to come. The idea that you could have a one-shop place effectively with one product, where you don't have to go through and spend lots and lots of money on R&D and development to create a product. There's actually somebody that has an existing user base that you just need to pay them to put it on the cartridge. It makes certainly Evercade a very valuable proposition for a lot of those licenses as well. So, it's one of those things that there's always going to be something that's way out there that somebody remembers and will want to play again. And everybody, it doesn't matter how much there is the proliferation of the internet and the ability to access these games easily digitally, people always want it in their hands. They always want that kind of physicality, because the nostalgia of the game is also tied to the nostalgia of what they remember having it. physically playing it, putting the cartridge in, blowing the dust off the cartridge, and all those little quirks that we all grew up with. So it really kind of helps bring that user experience full circle. And I think the publishers of these games also agree with that, because they remember the experiences when they were making these games and publishing them in the first instance.
Well, I'm quite interested about the design of the console as well. I mean, talk us a bit through the specs of the system and kind of what it can do for people that might not have got their hands on one yet.
The handheld. So obviously we've got the handheld, which has been around since June last year, and this year we've got the home console coming out, which I guess we can talk about. But in terms of the handheld, it's got a 1.2 gigahertz processor in it, and it runs kind of 8, 16-bit and 32-bit games, various different formats, across a variety of systems. So the system itself, the handheld itself, has got a 4.3-inch screen, which is like a PSP size. Has 2 front-facing speakers, and it has battery life of about 4 hours roughly. There's a cartridge slot in the back, and that's kind of the key point. So that cartridge slot, we can put any one of these cartridges in, and off you go. It's quite a simple real UI experience, really. You just plug it in and off you go. You've got a set of save states, that kind of stuff. Normal things people are used to, and you can change the aspect ratio. One of the other key things about the handheld is it does have a HDMI out, so you can plug into the TV. So it's got a nice if you want to play it on TV, you can. It's actually a single player experience, so people have been using it, and inside the games themselves on the cartridges, we've still got the 2-player or more in there. So this year, with the new console, we're kind of opening that up to a multiplayer experience, which is kind of the next thing we're offering.
And were there any systems that you looked at for inspiration? I mean, like any consoles in the past that you kind of wanted to take elements of when you were designing the system?
I'm going to say now, I bet Andrew's going to say the Lynx.
Well, actually, in terms of the D-pad, I think, I don't know what you guys think, but I've always been a massive fan of the Saturn and the Mega Drive D-pad. Everyone's got kind of their own preferences here, but the D-pad was really important to get right. There's not really that kind of D-pad in many handhelds. There's not a lot of time spent, I don't think, but in development on this kind of thing. So we did spend a lot of time on that to make sure it felt good. But yeah, that and then the color scheme and stuff is a bit Famicom, and it's kind of supposed to be kind of modern retro, I guess. So it's meant to feel retro but have kind of modern touches.
It's one of those things where kind of there has always been companies that have a certain look and a certain style, but as time has gone on, the look and style has actually become what the aesthetic is, as opposed to what it is signifying as a brand or anything else. And I think the handheld and certainly the new VS console certainly takes its cue aesthetically and design-wise from a lot of those kind of areas of nostalgia in that aesthetic, and sort of bundles it together in a really nice, really neat package.
And I think it is important that you did pay attention to the D-pad as well, because that does, like you mentioned then, it does seem to be an area that's often overlooked on modern consoles. Now most games are played with analog sticks on modern systems. When you try and play a retro game on an Xbox 360 springs to mind, though that was a horrible D-pad on there. But the fact that it is more comfortable to play those games that were designed to use a D-pad on, like one that feels good on the hand, I think.
It's one of those things as well. I think Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's actually quite a lot of legality around D-pad design in general, all the way from the mid 1980s to even the Xbox and PlayStation pads of today. There are certain things that you absolutely cannot do because they're owned by people, and a lot of people, I think, spent the last 20-25 years designing pads around how can we make this pad our own while still having the playability that everybody wants to have. And you're right, everybody's had their own solutions to it. And playing, if I remember rightly, the Xbox 360 D-pad was slightly raised at the tip, wasn't it? So like where you'd have 2 analog sticks, you'd have like a little ridge around the side, but the D-pad was there rather than an analog stick like you would have on PlayStation. It sort of felt like you had to reach your thumb over a bit more in order to do stuff with that. But I think, inspired by like the designs of things like the Saturn and that era of gaming, like the D-pad that we've got, sort of seems to be the best one. And you have a look at what pads are used now for retro gamers and the third-party pads and the licensed pads. They all look down that angle, partly because of the legality, but also partly because this is what gives the best playability to the widest array of games that are available.
Well, another important aspect is the cartridges. And how do you go about kind of designing a cartridge system and getting these cartridges, and also kind of deciding on the size limitations in the modern day?
Yeah, so the cartridges is kind of, that's what this is all about. And I think we're talking about touch and feel and that kind of stuff. And I think the cartridges are really a big part of that. So opening up that case and new cart smell kind of thing, and getting the manual out, the whole point of this is really, people are going to play these games in lots of ways, but we're trying to take them back to kind of a time period in their lives, I think. And I think when we design the cartridge, obviously when you're doing a handheld, which is what we were doing initially, you've got size limitations physically, so you don't want it to be too huge, because obviously that's not practical. We looked at a lot of handheld cartridges from the past, found a kind of the right kind of size and feel for that. And then in terms of what goes on inside, so having the right amount of memory in there so that we can support the right number of games. So because they're kind of £15 per cartridge at the moment, which is kind of, I think, a pretty reasonable price. And you tend to get, on average, I'd say 8 to 10 games on each one. There's some considerations there as we get, things. We've got a collection which has got Worms on, which has got 3 titles on there. It has one Worms Armageddon on there as well. So that actually is a larger kind of file size game. So as we get bigger file sizes, as these games got newer and newer, the file sizes as they went to disc and stuff, got a lot larger. So what we're doing is you have to have a little consideration as to what the practical price points of those are, and whether that makes our price point go up. So we're very aware of the value we want to offer people. So we're very much concentrating on that, and it's been quite interesting because we've had some cartridges. The way we've done it, I suppose, is we've said, right, what are the games on each cartridge almost worth to people? So how many we could include. So things like Atari 2600, whereas, as a gaming experience, it's very nostalgic, but, people feel like 20 titles on a cartridge was the right amount kind of thing. And then when it comes down to, the newer titles, stuff that's getting into like late 90s and things like that, it starts to be, people will kind of accept less titles on there. They see the value of the graphics and all the music and everything else on each title. So it's a bit of a mix, really.
Well, talk us through some of the highlights of the titles that are available on the Evercade then, and also how do you go about picking them and getting them licensed?
So, yeah, we've got, as I say, by the end of the year, 26 cartridges that will be available. There are currently 16 available at the moment, and if you buy an Evercade, you either get 1 or 3, depending on your pack option. So that's always going to be an Atari, the first Atari collection, which has some great things that people remember from those 2600 days, but also a lot of things that people probably hadn't discovered from the later Atari days, such as the 7800, which was Atari's last home console in that kind of era before they went into disc-based stuff. So there's a game on there, for example, called Ninja Golf that the community of Evercade really loves. And whenever anybody plays it, they think, how has this not been remade into a modern game? And your premise of that is you're playing golf on a golf course as a ninja, and in between the shots, you're having to run the gauntlet of ninjas coming at you and jumping and attacking them. And it's such a simple concept, but it's one of those things that those kind of retro games really, really bring, that kind of, oh, I do remember this, or I've never discovered this, but this is a great idea. So the Atari collection comes with everything that we sell. We have various different pack options. If you're in the US, you have Data East as one of our pack options. And if you're in the UK and the EU, you have Namco Museum as one of our pack options. So then you start getting into really big hitters from the console arcade conversions, such as Pac-Man and Galaga and Dig Dug, all the way through to more modern things as well that seem to have come out, like Splatterhouse. So we've got Splatterhouse 2 and 3 on one of the collections. And Splatterhouse 3 is a game I think is if you were to buy it new now, is reaching into the hundreds of pounds at quite an alarming rate. So you get the idea that there are these games that are highly valued that you can play for, as we said, like that entry point of £15. And then we bring in a lot of the other big hitters, I would say, of the 80s and 90s that a lot of people remember. So we have both of the Earthworm Jim games from Interplay, along with a couple of other Interplay games at the time, like Battle Chess, Clay Fighters. We have stuff from Data East, like we said, like Bad Dudes and Burger Time, real big things, but also things mixed in with stuff like Technos, like Double Dragon and River City Ransom. All these are the games that everybody loves. But as Andrew was saying earlier, we have a lot of these other collections of things. And two of the most fascinating ones are the Mega Cat Studio collections, which really, really give you an idea of how people are programming new games for old hardware and still bringing new ideas and making a lot of fun happening with games like Tanza and Coffee Crisis. And Pico Interactive, who are a company that have basically acquired a lot of rights to games from over the course of the last 20, 30 years. So where companies have gone bankrupt and things have gone up for sale, they kind of bought little bits here and there. And they've got such a vast and unique collection of games that we started publishing that were originally on those systems. So people remember things recently. We've had things like Soccer Kid and World Trophy Soccer and the Summer and Winter Challenge games, and all the way through to JRPGs like Brave Battle Saga. And there's such a wealth of titles that people know, don't know, are just discovering. And then as recently, we've got Worms that's coming out on the system. We've got Codemasters games such as Sensible Soccer coming onto the system. We've got really classic stuff like the Intellivision collection. We've got British royalty with the Bitmap Brothers collection. So that's games like the Chaos Engine and Speedball. And then we've got arcade conversions coming now at the end of this year. So there's a wealth of, it's far too many. I mean, it's around about 280 titles that we got in total across all of those cartridges. So probably too much to list, but enough to get excited about by just a few mentions here and there. But the decision process is very much a curated one that goes back to that fun. What is fun? What's going to be good? What are people going to recognize immediately? What are they going to remember? What are they going to enjoy discovering for the first time, like Ninja Golf? And, is it fun? And I think that's the core of everything that we do, is make sure that what we've got is worth somebody getting it and sticking it in the cartridge and having a good time. Because that's what we do. We get the games, stick them in the cartridge and work out whether they're fun.
It's great, the physicality, because, we're in a world with e-stores and kind of downloadable codes and stuff. And, just seeing users with a collection of all of your Evercade carts all kind of lined up in those really fantastic boxes must be just like massively satisfying. And it appeals so much to the retro gaming community. Are these both compatible with the Evercade Verse then? So you can have them on the handheld and on the Verse? Yes.
All of it is compatible from the hardware point of view. So any game that's coming out on for the Evercade VS is also compatible with the Evercade handheld. So all of the new games will still work on that. And vice versa, any of the existing collection of the Evercade games will work on the Evercade VS. There is one exception to that rule, which is, as Andrew was saying at the beginning, that licenses are a tricky thing, is the Namco Museum collection, which is our second and sixth cartridge, I believe the numbers are. But the license that we have for Namco to distribute those games only covers Europe at the moment, and it only covers the handheld. So they are exclusively available for the handheld. We're working on that. Hopefully, we'll come up with some kind of solution to that where, everybody will be able to enjoy all those games across all our systems. But it is one of the quirks of licensing.
One thing that's obviously important to people that want, physical games, and, it was obviously a much bigger deal in the past than it is today, which is nice to see that you guys pay attention to this, is creating manuals. So how do you do this then and, make sure that it looks good rather than just, photocopying or scanning the old one?
Yeah, I think when we looked at this in the first instance, we were, as I say, we were looking at, how do you make a cartridge and how do you make a cartridge experience? And I think the manual, as you say, is really key. So when we started doing manuals, we sort of made them a little. The way we looked at it was make them a little love letter to each game. So we there's a bit of artwork there. There's an explanation of the game. There's an explanation of the controls, but there's also kind of who created it, which it might be that the designers listed, or it depends on what's available, what the licensor will let us put. But often it just gives you a little insight into that game. I think one of the feedback we had was people did want a little bit more information in their manuals. So I think that's something we take it in. I think our feeling was, well, if you read the manual, it's to give you a feeling about the game. Loads of games on the system are quite relatively simple. You can learn them quite quickly. Some games require a load of explanation, and I think that's something we're working on to get a bit more information in there. But yeah, Google exists, so people kind of tend to look up, themselves.
Yeah, we've also got a really good fan community on that have been very passionate about not just the Evercade, but the games and everything that's on there. Some of them run their own websites that host a lot of these original manuals that have been scanned into databases from a long time ago. People do YouTube videos explaining the games, and there's even a magazine that's been made from a community of people that review it, give you some did you knows and things like that. So where we haven't been able to get everything into a manual package, there's quite a lot of resource out there that the community themselves have curated to help people that have come in or haven't done this before, so they don't spend hours trawling through the Google. But the joy is that it just exists and we can easily find that information. But I think a lot of the work as well with that goes down to Andrew when he first got the console running, and the team as it's grown over the year, and getting people in to be able to do some great art, some great design work in there as well to really evoke how the manuals felt when you got them originally back in the day.
Well, another hugely important aspect is the actual game and how it plays. And what's the process of porting and emulating these titles and kind of tweaking them so they run perfectly on the console?
So when it comes to emulation, this is another thing that's really key for the system. So we kind of want I think a lot happens with kind of emulation consoles is often they put an emulator on there and then they bung a load of games on, and the attention to detail is not there. So what we've been really careful to do as much as possible is to try to give everyone the authentic experience. So the emulators we've chosen often are the best available for each game, and then we might customize the emulator. We work with some of the developers, and then we customize the emulator. So you might find that we've got 2 or 3 versions of that emulator on the cartridge itself, which is running different games. So we get the best experience for each one. So yeah, when you plug in a cart, you should have a really good experience from an emulation perspective, and it should feel as authentic as possible, and look great, and none of the kind of glitches or issues you might find.
We've all played those kind of other systems that, try to do emulation, but then the sound's off or the frame rate's not quite right, and it really does take you out the experience.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than screen tearing and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the advantages we've got when we curate these collections. We really can say, all right, we've got 10 games to focus on here, guys. Let's make them as brilliant as possible. So that's what we do.
That kind of lack of multiplayer function, did that lead you guys to wanting to create the Evercade VS?
In a way, yes. I mean, one of the key things that we remember when we were young, and I'm sure you guys do as well, when you're playing games, in the modern context, when you play with somebody, you're playing online, you're playing via connection, you're playing over a headset. And while that's great and it's a brilliant experience and it's globally reached gaming around the world, at the same time, a lot of the games that were designed in those times that we are releasing were designed for people sitting next to each other. And whether that's people baiting each other, giving each other a little dig in the ribs, some brotherly love, or anything that ended up sort of being a competitive environment there and then. I mean, arcades themselves were competitive environments for people that learn to master the game, either with a friend next to you or against somebody else who's trying to beat your score. So it was always a point where we didn't want to change any of the games on the handheld in order to facilitate, if we could do something multiplayer, then we would be able to just do it at a drop of the hat. We wouldn't have to change anything that we'd already done. And with the console as the idea, it very much opened up to saying, well, we can do this because, the console won't have a screen because it plugs into your TV. So what can it have? It can have multiple controls. So therefore, here we go. We've got the multiplayer element. So it's one of those things that it's always been there on the games. And one of the first things a lot of people said when they did get the Evercade is that they would love to be able to play these games multiplayer, because a lot of people remember playing these games together with family members and with friends when they were growing up. So now the VS has that, and we brought that into the design decision from the ground up. It's really there. I mean, there's not that many, if any, I think, mini consoles of the previous nostalgia wave that had support for over 2 players. And many games as well don't have support for over 2 players, but there are some that do, and there are some that are 4 players. And I think that was key to us to make sure that we can get as many people around the unit and remembering that at the time of playing. And luckily for us, I guess as well, in so much as we managed to survive everything that had been going on over the last year in the world, to be able to bring everybody this product, and everybody was able to experience it at home, and now they'll be able to experience it on the go as people start commuting and the world opens up again. There'll be people that very much want to go and see people and want to have those communal experiences that we actually had growing up. So it seems like it's kind of coming at the right time as well to fulfill all of the needs of what a lot of the retro gaming enthusiasts will have.
Yeah, I think you're right as well, because when I think back to, my fondest gaming memories of being a kid and a teenager, it was always with my brother or my friends. All those fondest memories involve other people being there as well.
And it is a very key thing as well, is that there is that kind of communal love for it. I mean, I'll be honest, I've played, I say in recent memory, it's not that recent memory. Just, as you get older, things feel recent, and somebody tells you it was 15 years ago and you go, oh, really? Oh, okay. But one of the things that I did with some of my friends is my friend pulled out his old Mega Drive one night before we went out to a pub and went out to a nightclub, as you do when you're much younger. And we made a drinking game out of one of the old side-scrolling beat-em-up games that was on that console. Suffice to say, we did not make it to the nightclub, but but that's the thing. Like we found a new way to sort of remember the communal atmosphere, and then just play it together as friends and have a laugh. And I think that's one of the things that certainly as the world changes again, as it's, I say, go back to normality, but I suppose opens itself up to a new thing. I think a lot of those experiences and a lot of those memories will come to the fore a lot more, and being able to do them with something like the Evercade is a real strong point for it. Not to say that there's anything wrong with playing online, and hopefully at some point some kind of online feature set will be able to come to the Evercade VS with its built-in Wi-Fi, so it's not completely out of the realms of possibility. But online play is very much you are playing communally, but it's still a very solo experience for where you are.
Yeah, I know you can't punch your little brother in the arm when he beats you on Xbox Live.
Well, in my previous job before starting this, me and my colleagues, there was about 7 of us. Every lunchtime for 18 months, would play the Nintendo fighting game with all the characters. Every lunchtime, it came out, we just played it, and then that was it. And that was our communal gaming. Every officially 60 minutes, probably unofficially 75 to 80 minutes of lunch, but that spurred so many things. One of the people went on to create their own tournament around that game where they could get more communal things and having people come and play. And I think that's one of the things that really is missing from modern games. And I don't know if you've seen anything for like a modern racing game, or one of the things, whenever a brand new game comes out, there's always people that ask, what about split screen?
Yeah.
Can we do that? So it's still there. And the want for local multiplayer, co-op or otherwise, is still there. It always has been there. And this is just a great way to bring it back and get everybody involved.
So what are the main differences between the VS and the Evercade?
So the handheld is obviously a single player experience. What the VS does in terms of how they're intercompatible. So the VS, obviously the cartridges you can use in both systems, but also if you have a save state, so if you're on the bus or whatever, and you're playing your handheld, and you save your game, you take the cartridge out, you put it in the VS, and the state is on the cartridge, not on the system. So you can carry on playing basically. So it's, both systems work together there. And you can also use the handheld as an additional controller for the VS. So you plug it in and, it works as a controller. So it's, they're also compatible there. But I think it's kind of an ecosystem where you've got different ways to play as much as anything. I know that other systems, for example, the Switch, you've got it all built into one thing. But I think with us, we've got relatively low price points, so we're giving people a choice to buy one or the other, or if they want to, both. And I think it's a slightly different experience. I mean, as I was saying before, you can play 720p on the handheld as a single player on TV. With the VS, you can play. It does 1080p for the system, and you can play obviously with your friends. So it's a slightly different thing. Hopefully, it's complementary.
Well, earlier you mentioned the indie titles and the kind of new retro style studios that are appearing on the Evercade. Are we going to see any more of these? And also, what arcade titles are you guys looking at releasing?
So with the indie games, yes, we're looking all the time. We've had I will say unofficial from the point of view that we haven't really overly publicized it, but we do have a developer program in place, and we're looking at how we can market a lot more of these independent games that have been designed around these old consoles and designed around the older aesthetic of video games, and give these people some limelight in this. So that is an open thing right now, and something that will be launched en masse in the future once we've managed to get a way to get all these to people. So that's something that we will see more of in future. One of the cartridges that's coming out later this year is a second collection from Megacat Studios of some more of their great titles that they published that have been designed for older hardware as well. So that's always going to be one of our key focuses. As we've already said, there's lots of classic games and there's lots of things that people are rediscovering for the first time. There's also a lot of these hidden gems out there and these great indie titles, and that's one of our core focuses. Arcade kind of comes into that rediscovery, really. So out of the gate with the Evercade VS and available separately when it launches, there are 4 arcade collections coming, all based around notable publishers of the arcade time. One of the big ones, of course, being Atari. So there's lots of Atari arcade games that everybody remembers, things like Asteroids, Lunar Lander, that kind of thing. There's also Technos, who were the developers of Double Dragon, among quite a few other games as well. Things like Battle Lane, Super Blockout, I believe it is. And they're all coming on that. There's Data East, again, another really big arcade developer at the time. So we've got things like the original Bad Dudes versus Dragon Ninja, Sly Spy, Wizard Fire, Burger Time, the original arcade version, which it looks like we've got Burger Time twice in some ways because it's on the original home consoles, but there's a lot of people that absolutely love the arcade version compared to the home console port of what was originally released, just from their own memory of playing it. So that was kind of essential for us to get that on there. And then it's our third collection in the line, but one of the more interesting rediscovered gems is a Spanish arcade company called Galco. It's one of the ones that's actually quite personal to me because I used to play the games that this company produced when I was young on holiday in Spain. But they're a Spanish arcade company that distributed a little bit to America, but a lot of people from Europe, if you went to the Spanish sun resorts of the time or the Balearic Islands across the 90s, you'd have undoubtedly played a Galco game. There's a lot of things that people probably either don't remember or look at and then suddenly remember. You suddenly get that ping of, I do remember that game, or I do remember playing that. World Rally's been one of the key ones that people have said, which is a top-down racing game based on the Rally series. But there's also great platform games like Alligator Hunt and Biomechanical Toy, and there's all these things that people may not have heard of before, but they'll get them and they'll get them in hands. They'll play them and be like, "This is really a lot of fun."
And who's mainly buying the system then? Is it people that are like really into the retro gaming world, or are you getting people that are like coming back into it and rediscovering it via the Evercade?
I think it's a bit of both, really. There's people in our community who know absolutely everything about all this stuff. Much more than we do. But there's also people that are just kind of picking up and finding this stuff for the first time. So it's a bit of a mix. I think that we've got some big titles, and then there's these kind of hidden gems as well, and this new stuff. So I think when people buy a cartridge, they know what they'll get. They'll get kind of a mix of kind of weird and wonderful things. They'll get some stuff they perhaps recognize or remember, and then they get the whole nostalgia in the package. So I think it's a real mix.
Well, what kind of your future plans? And have you got ideas to expand the console range in the future and keep it going?
Yeah, we've hit. I think our initial. I think I did a kind of interview right at the beginning, and we were saying, right, well, we want to kind of do 50 plus cartridges in the life of the console, but I can see it being much more, and I can see all sorts of variety coming. Whether it's newer titles with retro feel. I think we'd be looking at some of the big players in all this, and that's one of the advantages of the system. We can keep adding to it. So if you buy the console, then you know that you're going to get more and more stuff, and you can pick and choose what you want. You can collect it all. You can do what you like. But and I think with the VS coming along, it's kind of like a new thing, a new way to play, and you kind of realise that the Evercade is not a handheld as such. Evercade is, a company that's delivering lots of ways to play these games, and the cartridges are the thing that kind of links it all up. So I think we'll kind of be forever physical. That'll be something we're always trying to do, to be physical, to make physical products. And I think Sean was talking about online stuff, and I think that there's potential for that. I think we're thinking along the lines of leaderboards or that kind of thing. So if you buy that cartridge, you can enter onto leaderboards, global leaderboards, that kind of stuff. That's kind of planned for the future. I think I don't know. We kind of look at it like there's sort of streaming and online stuff in music, where you've got your Spotify's and those big players and stuff. We kind of want to be the vinyl, I suppose, of video games in a way.
I kind of love it because it's like a family of machines, as opposed to a small mini console that's a bit of a flash in the pan. You just get it and then it's not updatable or usable in the future. And it's a really nice idea, guys.
It's one of those things, actually. We use the term family quite a lot internally. Like, it's the Evercade family of systems. It's the Evercade family of cartridges. It's because, for us, we are quite a small team in that regard. So we are always quite close to the project and quite close to the things that we do, all the way from like game curation to art creation to the design of the thing to getting everything out. So it kind of all feels like a family, from like us as a team to us as the company to the products of the company and to the games that are out there. They're part of a great big family of nostalgia and memories, not just for us, thankfully, but to thousands and thousands and thousands of people who love the fact that they've got a new way to discover these games in a very playable way.
Well, Sean and Andrew, it's been incredible hearing some of your stories and your passion for retro gaming and keeping it vibrant and keeping it alive with the Evercade project. I think is fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on and being our guest this week, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.